Well, it's what time is it?
It's 4 o'clock. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Timberline family and those others that may be joining us today.
Bit of Downton Abbey there. What were we thinking?
Well, we just thought we'd change it up a little bit and show you a little bit of a TV show. Actually, lots of people in Colorado and our American friends have told us how much they enjoy programs like Downton Abbey and various other British dramas.
Yeah, and actually Downton Abbey is it's not called Downton Abbey, and it's quite close to where we are at right now. Probably about 50 miles away, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And we've actually been there a couple of times during the summer when it's open to visitors. Obviously, right now during this COVID season, nothing's open right now. Anyways, we have been there, and it's called Highclere Castle now. And did you know, originally it was a Georgian mansion. So if you probably can't see that picture too well, but when you've seen pictures of Downton Abbey, it's all those towers on top weren't there, so it was kind of a flattish roof originally. And then the Earl of the time decided to employ Sir Charles Barry, his name was, architect, to redesign the house, and he also was one of the designers for the Houses of Parliament. So do you notice a similarity between the Houses of Parliament and Downton Abbey?
Yeah, if you look closely at it, it's got a tower. It's a bit of an odd thing to do. Like, I tell you what, darling, let's extend the house and add a tower
or two.
It's an odd thing, really. But yeah, it does look very similar to the Houses of Parliament in its design, which is either genius or it means the architect wasn't that creative and was just banging out Houses of Parliament houses all over the place, really.
I think it was a fashionable of the time.
Yeah. What about bedrooms? How many?
Well, I believe there's over 300 rooms in Highclere Castle and 50 plus bedrooms, but it was in a pretty poor shape a few years back, and then prior to the TV show.
And they must have had loads of cash from the TV show, but when we went there, there's lots of rooms that are still not refurbished.
That's right. There's like over 50 rooms that have not been touched yet, and they need some tender loving care. So hopefully as the years go by, they'll be able to do that. Also, now you can actually book the grounds for a wedding. So anybody over there who's thinking about getting married, here's a thought. Come to Highclere Castle for your wedding.
Probably cost a lot more cash, I would think.
It probably would, Jeff, I know. But
now,
what a nice thought.
A lot of the Downton Abbey thing is about the relationships between upstairs, the people who owned the house and their family, who, spent a lot of time swanning around and sewing and talking.
Going to charity dinners and things.
And dressing up, like really dressing up for dinner. We don't normally dress for dinner, do we?
No, not normally.
We do dress for dinner, but we don't dress up for dinner, just to make that a little bit clearer.
And they had people to actually help them get dressed. Could you imagine that?
Yeah.
Having somebody to actually help put your clothes on.
You didn't really do anything very much, did you? But the Downton Abbey thing, the whole premise of the show is about the relationships between upstairs and downstairs. The servants were downstairs in the kitchens. Their accommodation was normally right at the top of the house.
Usually the small rooms in the attic.
And getting to the top of the house, a special staircase.
They would have their own staircase, usually a small stone steps going up to the top of the house. And did you know, health and safety would have a laugh about this. Because of the high levels of the house, if there was a fire to evacuate, it was a bit like an aircraft. They would have these chutes made of sheets that they would tie to metal rings in the window, and they would slide down and get out of the house if it was on fire that way.
Doesn't sound very good.
Bit scary.
As you know, as we've been to Downton Abbey, and as we've watched, and by the way, Debbie's saying better than Jeff and Ori is Jeff and Kay and Ori. Could hardly say that. Yeah, we're not comparing.
No.
But what was I going to say? Yeah, when we went to Downton, we were kind of reminded very much of the very rigid class system that there existed back then. And, you were working class, middle class, upper class, although middle class is relatively recent. It was pretty much upper class or lower class. That wasn't just about money. That was about birth. It was about like a clergyman who might not earn very much, and I use the word clergyman advisedly because back then, sadly, it was just all men. But a clergyman would be a member of the upper class even though he didn't have very much money because his occupation was seen to be quite respectable. And a lot of the class system, as Downton Abbey shows, a lot of it was broken down by the First World War because the men, the ordinary working men, well, we're all ordinary, upper class, lower class, whatever, but the working men were in the trenches with the officers. They were fighting side by side, and I think they suddenly realised, living in that close proximity, that there was no basic difference. They were all human beings, and so the class system started to erode at the end of the First World War.
That's right.
I mean, let's face it, in these days when our hearts are breaking about racial injustice, and this was all about another type of prejudice. It was you were classified and you were categorised, and there were ceilings, there were limits on what you could do according to the class in which you were born. And we've been doing a little bit of research into our family backgrounds and found, for example, that my great-grandfather and great-grandmother both died separately in workhouses. A workhouse?
So a workhouse, often they were in the cities and they were huge buildings, not very nice places, hasten to add, where you would actually live and work. So it was those people that did not have anything. They were so poor that they had to basically work for their lodging and some food, and the conditions were terrible. And they'd have workhouses for women and workhouses for men. So families would get totally split up. Children often went with the ladies to the women's workhouse, but just terrible conditions. And the children also were having to work as well. One of those films that kind of depicts this is Oliver Twist, if you remember that one.
Yeah. I mean, awful conditions. As I say, my great-grandparents died in one of those. And then my mother, at the age of 14, not in a workhouse, but she was in domestic service in one of these big houses, I think as a parlour maid, which means that she would be cleaning things all day and cleaning out the fires and polishing the silver and measuring the table, although that wouldn't have been the chambermaid or the parlour maid,
No,
would it?
that would have been more the butlers and those that would serve the dinner and the meals.
What's that measuring the table thing? Was that about the cutlery?
So they were very precise about how the dinner table should be laid, with the plates, with the silverware, and they had literally a measuring stick or a ruler where they would make sure it was within the exact measurements of how it should be laid out from the very... And if you've seen some of these rather posh laid tables, you'd have 5 different forks and knives and spoons, and the trick to that is you start with the outside ones and you work your way in through the courses.
And if you didn't know the etiquette, woe betide, your life was, you weren't very well thought of if you didn't know the process. It could be a little
embarrassing, that's for sure.
So that's Downton Abbey, quite near to us. What's for tea today? You said there was a surprise, darling, earlier.
Well, today we're having a hot cross bun, if you can see that. It has a cross on the top.
I'm not quite sure whether we have these in America, so maybe someone... Debs or whoever is watching there in Colorado, let us know. Do we have hot cross buns in Colorado, in the US? I really don't know. And the cross on the bun. Yeah, what was that about? It's Easter, isn't it?
It is actually something that we have at Easter. Yes, happy Easter, somebody says. Exactly. We eat these probably the whole month of April here.
Actually, I think we eat them most of the year round.
You can actually get everything all year round, can't you? Which is a bit of a shame. And Cindy says it looks yummy. We are going to taste it for you in a moment.
And Paul says don't know of them in Colorado.
Yeah. So
So does Liz. So does Liz. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So this was something that the 12th century monks actually invented, because I think there's always been buns in England, but they decided to add the cross to the top because...
Cross of Jesus.
Exactly.
I mean, let's face it, and it's a bit odd, isn't it? Putting a cross symbol on a bun, but then when you think about it, it's a bit odd at one logical level to wear a cross, which is an instrument of torture and death, as a piece of jewellery. However, what we as followers of Jesus know is that the cross to us is a symbol of life. And going back to Downton Abbey and going back to workhouses and different classes, the cross is also a place where people of every different ethnicity and background, every different social level, from the richest to the poorest, everybody can meet together at the cross of Jesus, where there is forgiveness and grace, not only in the cross and in the resurrection. And one of the wonderful things that we've been talking about, all this classism and this class prejudice that existed, the early church flourished because they broke the culture, the Roman culture, which was very, very classist. The Romans had a system called, or a cultural system called liberatis. And liberatis, it was a system of you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. You'd give something to someone if you felt they could pay you back. And that worked really well unless you didn't have anything to pay back, like the widows and the orphans. And the early church, in their caring for the poor, and not just their own poor, the early church, in staying behind in plague-infested cities and caring for the dying, and often dying themselves during those seasons, the early church got its message out because they broke through those cultural barriers. I can get a little bit excited about this. They broke through those cultural barriers. They broke through the barriers of prejudice. They cared for the poor. They reached all stratas of society. And before printing presses and before radio and TV, and even before Facebook Live, even before that, they managed to change the world with their message. The Hot Cross Bun, it's a rather strange thing, but it carries a symbol of life. Well, we hope that you've enjoyed us talking a bit about Downton Abbey or Highclere Castle, as it actually is. And I'm just trying to scan down.
You can buy Hot Cross Buns in Colorado, some in Denver, Estes Park.
And Debs has got an Australian friend in Atlanta who makes them.
Nice.
Cindy is saying looks yummy. I think there are other questions on there, but actually we've taken up everybody's time now. Barbara says, Mum served those Hot Cross Buns every Easter Sunday for breakfast. Well, I don't know what time it is. Alexa, what time is it?
It's 4:14 p.m.
It's 4:14 p.m, says Alexa, and that means it probably is time for us to go. We send lots of love to you, to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you for afternoon tea next Thursday at 4. And we are now going...
We don't know where we're going to be next week, do we?
It's a mystery.
It will be a mystery.
And
so check in with us and see what we're up to.
And the reason it's a mystery is because we haven't decided yet. We'd like to show a tantalising glance at the Hot Cross Bun.
We're now going to eat the Hot Cross Bun.
We can't share it with you, but we're going to do this for you. Send us a few hearts before we go. It would be nice to know that you're there. Mark says hi, Jeff and Kay. Keith says looking forward to the series on Antioch. That'll be, I'm really looking forward to that. Very excited.
That's starting this weekend,
Starting this coming weekend. So looking forward to that.
Oh, and this weekend's a special weekend.
It's Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there.
Yeah. God bless you. Have a great day.
See you.
Lots of love.
Bye-bye.
Bye.